She gave her lunch to a hungry child and was fired in front of her students. 1 month later, her name was engraved at the front of the school. And that's when everyone finally understood where justice begins. I'll never forget the sound of that office door clicking shut behind me. That was the moment it stopped being just another day in Hartford Elementary and became the day the floor dropped out from under my life. I'm Mrs. Ellison Brooks. I teach 3rd grade, or I used to. In a town where everybody knows everybody and news spreads faster than a wildfire in August, I had a reputation. Not flashy, not famous, just a woman with sensible shoes, a messy desk, and a soft spot for the kids nobody else saw. I kept tissues by the reading rug, Band-Aids in my drawer, and extra snacks in my bag, just in case. That just in case came knocking yesterday. Her name's Jamie, 8 years old, wears her brother's hand-me-downs and hides her lunch tray like it's something shameful. And maybe it is, because that tray's been empty more often than not. Her mom works graveyard shifts, the kind of job where benefits is a punchline and sleep's a luxury. She tried signing Jamie up for free lunch, but the paperwork hadn't processed yet. Meanwhile, her daughter's stomach growled through subtraction drills. So I did what any human being with a beating heart would do. I gave her my lunch. Nothing fancy, just some pasta salad, an apple, and a brownie wrapped in foil. I slid it onto her desk with a wink and whispered, "Don't tell the others or they'll start getting hungry too." She smiled like I'd handed her gold. I didn't think twice, but someone else did. Next morning, I got a note in my mailbox. "Please see Principal Tracy immediately." Carl Tracy, mid-50s, gray tie, no soul. The kind of man who calls himself a leader because he stands behind a podium twice a year. I walked into his office, expecting maybe a warning, maybe a chat about procedure. Instead, he handed me a letter. No eye contact, no conversation. "You're being terminated effective immediately." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Violation of school nutrition protocol," he said. "Unauthorized distribution. Overstepping professional boundaries." I laughed, not out of humor, out of disbelief. I gave a child lunch. He didn't flinch. "That's not your decision to make." So that was it. No hearing, no explanation, no union rep. Just a pink slip and a trip back to my classroom to collect my things while a secretary watched to make sure I didn't pocket a stapler on my way out. They treated me like a thief. Word spread like it always does. I passed parents in the hallway. Some nodded sympathetically, some avoided my eyes. I saw Jamie standing by the lockers, clutching her backpack like it could shield her. I smiled at her, but she didn't smile back, just looked confused, hurt, like someone had pulled the sun out of the sky. And then came the final indignity. They walked me out, in front of the kids, in front of the teachers I'd mentored, in front of Jamie. I'd spent 19 years in that building, decorated every bulletin board, sat through every storm drill and budget cut. I'd taught long division, handled playground fights, wiped tears, tied shoelaces. I knew which kid needed a fidget toy and which one needed a quiet minute. I'd done everything but sign the walls in paint. And still, one quiet act of compassion was all it took to turn me from teacher to criminal. My desk was still warm, my students still waiting for story time, but I was gone. They called it policy. But what they really meant was this: kindness wasn't in the budget. She sat on the school bench like she didn't know how to move anymore, still wearing her flower print blouse from that morning, the one the kids always said looked like sunshine, now wilted by the weight of humiliation. In her lap, a cardboard box that held the last pieces of her 20-year career, a few well-worn books, a coffee mug that read #1 teacher, and a crooked paper figurine labeled "To Mrs. Brooks, You're the Best," drawn by a little girl who hadn't eaten in 2 days. That little girl, Jamie, was sitting alone in the cafeteria right then, same plastic tray, still empty. No one offered her anything. No adult approached. The lunch line staff avoided eye contact, as if poverty was contagious and kindness was a liability. Worse, the whispers had already started, and from children no less. "You got her fired. It's your fault, Jamie. She gave you her lunch and now she's gone." Jamie kept her head down, her shoulders tensed. She didn't cry, not yet, but she was close. She was trying to be strong because that's what she thought grown-ups were supposed to do. She was 8 and already learning what guilt tastes like on an empty stomach. Meanwhile, Ellison sat outside in the October air, the box digging into her arms, the air stiff with silence. Her car was still parked across the lot, but getting up to walk toward it felt impossible. She wasn't just fired, she was erased, discarded, the kind of quiet exit meant to shame. And it worked. She felt numb, hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that used to matter and left a husk in its place. The superintendent didn't return her call. The district rep forwarded her email to Policy and Compliance. Principal Tracy, well, he hadn't said a word after the pink slip. Just looked at her like she was a broken copier someone finally had the guts to toss out. No one had asked what really happened. No one had cared that a child sat through the week with an aching belly, because, heaven forbid, a teacher act like a human being without checking the rulebook first. Hartford was the kind of place where the wrong haircut sparked front porch gossip by dinner time. So, naturally, by 3:15, the story had already twisted. Ellison stole food. She defied policy. Someone even said she yelled at Tracy in the hallway, which was rich considering the woman hadn't raised her voice in 2 decades. But nobody knew the most important detail. They didn't know who Jamie's father was. They didn't know he wasn't just some absent figure on the sidelines. They didn't know he'd been gone for a reason, and they definitely didn't know he was on his way back. Somewhere between Dallas and Hartford, a private jet cut through the clouds, carrying a man with a navy suit, a sealed folder, and a name that would soon send the entire school board scrambling. He hadn't seen Jamie in months. He'd tried to stay away. Not because he didn't care, but because his presence caused problems. His ex needed space, the courts had rules, and the world didn't need another man with money trying to fix things with checks. But then came the call, the kind of call that changes the tone of your voice and the pace of your life. They fired her, the teacher, for giving Jamie lunch. He didn't ask for context, didn't ask who they were. He just said 4 words, "I'm on my way." Because you don't mess with his daughter, and you definitely don't punish the one adult who looked after her when no one else would. It was the 3rd day after the firing. The school had settled into its usual rhythm. Bell rings, lockers slam, kids spill into the halls like nothing ever happened, as if teachers don't just disappear, as if Jamie wasn't still eating lunch alone. Then it happened. A black SUV, glossy, quiet, and definitely not from around here, rolled up in front of the school. Not a single dent, tinted windows, license plate from New York. Out stepped a man, 6'2", tailored navy suit, leather shoes that never touched dirt. No one recognized him. Not the staff, not the students, not even the curious PTA mom who hovered outside the main office like she ran the place. But they would know his name soon enough. Jason Lawrence, a billionaire, a national name in education reform, owner of the largest private investment group funding schools up and down the East Coast. And, oh, by the way, Jamie's father. He didn't smile, didn't pause, just walked through those glass doors like he built them. Security hesitated until he flashed a badge that said majority stakeholder and a folder with signatures that made the office manager sit up straight. A few years back, Jason had walked away from his family. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't clean, it was messy, selfish, and filled with regret. The kind of thing you don't talk about at fundraisers, but he never stopped trying to fix it. Letters, visits, legal steps. And when the courts finally opened the door, he stepped back into his daughter's life quietly, respectfully. And then someone dared to humiliate the only woman who'd looked after his child like she mattered. That was his red line. He didn't send a lawyer. He didn't file a complaint. He bought the building. Yes, literally, 3 days. That's all it took to finalize the paperwork. Jason already owned a silent 24% stake in the school's private education trust. One phone call turned that into 71%. One contract terminated the board. Another gave him full authority to restructure leadership, and that meant one man was next on the list, Mr. Carl Tracy. The principal had just finished his morning coffee when the email hit his inbox. Mandatory conference room briefing, 10 minutes. No subject line, no explanation, just a location. He walked in expecting a meeting about enrollment numbers. What he got was Jason Lawrence standing at the head of the table. "Mr. Tracy," Jason said, not offering a handshake. "Let's get to the point. You fired a teacher for feeding a hungry child." Tracy froze, face paling like he'd just seen a ghost. "This is a misunderstanding," he began. Jason cut him off with a slight shake of the head. "No. This was a calculated, cowardly move made to protect a rulebook and throw out a human being." Tracy opened his mouth, closed it again. He looked around the room. Empty chairs, no board, no backup. Just him and a man who now had the power to replace the locks on his office. Jason tossed a folder onto the table. "This is your exit agreement. Generous severance, clean references, but you're done here, effective immediately." "You can't do this," Tracy whispered. Jason raised an eyebrow. "I already did. You just hadn't checked your inbox yet." Outside that conference room, the staff was buzzing, rumors flying like confetti. "Who is that guy? Did he really just fire the principal? Wait, he's Jamie's dad? And Jamie?" She sat in the front row of her math class, still quiet, still trying to be small, unaware that the man who once missed her 6th birthday just changed the future of her school with the stroke of a pen. Carl Tracy walked into the conference room like he owned the place, straightened his tie, smoothed his blazer, nodded at the receptionist like he was about to deliver another one of his inspirational briefings, the kind where he talked for 20 minutes and said absolutely nothing. Business as usual. Only today wasn't usual. Today, the room wasn't filled with sleepy staff half listening over lukewarm coffee. Today, every seat was taken. Teachers, board members, even parents. And front row, seated like a storm in a silk suit, was Jason Lawrence. Carl hesitated mid-step. Jason didn't rise, didn't blink, just looked at him, calm, composed, and radiating the kind of quiet authority that makes lesser men forget their own names. And right beside him, Ellison Brooks. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't folding into the shadows like someone who'd been disgraced. She sat tall, spine straight, a manila folder in her lap and her eyes fixed on the man who had tried to erase her. Carl's smile cracked. He opened his mouth, maybe to offer some lukewarm apology, maybe to fake surprise. But Jason spoke first, and his voice landed like a gavel. "You fired the teacher who fed my daughter." Dead silence. "You fired the only adult who saw a hungry child and chose decency over policy. You punished her for compassion. You let your clipboard become more important than a kid's dignity." Carl swallowed hard. "Mr. Lawrence, You made a child believe she was a burden," Jason continued, "and you made a good woman carry shame for doing the right thing." Now the room shifted. Teachers nodded. A parent reached for her phone, already recording. Cameras clicked. The district's media team had been invited, discreetly, but deliberately. Carl's face turned pale. "You thought power meant control," Jason said. "But real power? Real leadership? It's justice. And justice starts with consequences." Carl tried to recover. I wasn't given full context." "You had context," Ellison said suddenly, her voice clear and calm. "You had a child with no lunch and a teacher who gave her one. That's all the context anyone needs." He froze. Jason stood now, slowly, intentionally. And the room held its breath. "Effective immediately," he said, turning to the board chair. "Mr. Tracy is relieved of his duties. A full review of his leadership has uncovered a pattern of retaliatory decisions, hostile workplace culture, and a total failure to protect students." A gasp. Whispers broke out. But Jason wasn't finished. "We don't reward leaders who humiliate teachers for doing their jobs. We don't applaud efficiency that sacrifices humanity. Not in this district. Not on my watch." Carl tried to speak again, but the board chair rose. "Mr. Tracy, please surrender your badge and keys." There it was. No debate, no delay. He looked around, searching for support. None came. Not from the teachers, not from the parents, and certainly not from Jamie, who stood just outside the doorway with her mother, watching it all unfold. Her eyes locked on Ellison, wide with the realization that someone had stood up. For her. For once. Carl turned and walked out, shoulders sagging under a weight no title could lift. That afternoon, the school held a small ceremony, not flashy, not PR polished, just a quiet gathering in the front hallway. They rehung the Wall of Honor, and this time, right at the center, gleamed a new plaque. "Dear Mrs. Ellison Brooks, for courage, compassion, and unshakable integrity." She didn't cry. She didn't grandstand. She just smiled. The kind of smile that comes from surviving the storm and standing taller because of it. 1 week. That's how long it took to flip the script. 7 days after being escorted out of Hartford Elementary like she'd committed a felony. Instead of feeding a hungry child, Mrs. Ellison Brooks walked right back through those double doors. Same floral blouse, same steady gaze. But this time, she wasn't alone. She didn't have to fight for a chair or justify her presence. She was invited. And not by the administration, by the children. Her class waited for her in perfect silence that morning, even though they'd been buzzing all week. Rumors flew faster than paper airplanes, but one thing every kid knew for sure. Mrs. Brooks was coming back, and when she did, she'd better see how much they missed her. So when she walked in, the room erupted. Applause, cheering. Some stood on chairs, others waved handmade signs that read, "Welcome home," and "Thank you, Mrs. B." One held up a crayon drawing of her giving Jamie a sandwich, with a speech bubble that said, "You matter." It hit her like a tidal wave. Then came Jamie, running across the room and throwing her arms around Ellison's waist, like she was afraid she'd vanish again. She didn't cry, not this time. She just held on tight, silently telling the woman who'd changed her life, "Please don't ever leave again." Ellison knelt down, her voice soft, but sure. "I'm not going anywhere." And she meant it. What followed was nothing short of a school-wide transformation. In just 1 week, Jason Lawrence had done more for Hartford Elementary than most districts manage in a decade. And he didn't do it with press releases or ribbon cuttings. He did it with decisions, fast ones. Free lunch for every student, no forms, no delays, no shame, new learning programs, updated books, fresh supplies, no more digging through half-dried markers or rationing construction paper. Every teacher had what they needed, not because they begged, but because someone finally listened. And in the teacher's lounge, right next to the bulletin board, hung a brand new plaque, the Ellison Brooks Fund, because no child should learn hungry. A permanent endowment, quietly funded by Jason himself, created in honor of the woman who refused to look away when a little girl sat through subtraction with nothing in her stomach but silence. But even that wasn't the most important change. Something deeper shifted in those halls. The students watched all of it unfold. The fall of a cold principal, the return of a beloved teacher, and the way a simple act of kindness echoed into something much larger. They saw the system bend. They saw truth win. And most importantly, they learned something no textbook had ever taught them. Kindness isn't weakness. Doing the right thing isn't foolish. It's powerful. And when someone stands up for you, you remember it for the rest of your life. One of the older students, 5th grade, usually quiet, asked his teacher that day, why did she get in trouble for helping? The teacher paused, then answered, "Because sometimes the world forgets what matters, but today we reminded it." Ellison didn't come back for revenge. She didn't strut through the halls like she owned the place. She came back to teach, to serve, to do the work that mattered to her, not because she was told to, but because she believed in it. And that's the thing no one at the district office saw coming. You can fire a person, but you can't erase the truth. And now the truth had a nameplate back on her door, kids in her classroom, and her mug. #1 teacher, back on the desk where it belonged. 1 month later, they put up the plaque. Right by the main entrance, the spot every parent passed on the way to the office, the wall where award photos used to hang and collect dust, now gleamed with something new, something earned, brushed bronze, centered, clean serif font. The Ellison Brooks classroom, the room where justice begins. It didn't shout, it didn't sparkle, it didn't need to, it spoke, and everyone listened. For weeks, the school had lived in the echo of what happened. Parents whispered less and showed up more. Teachers started speaking up during meetings instead of sitting with folded arms and lowered eyes. Lunch aides smiled more freely. Custodians got thank yous. Even the office staff, once hardened by red tape, started bending rules when the right thing needed to be done. Because everything changed the day someone proved that doing good wasn't naive. It was necessary. Right beside the plaque, mounted in a sturdy wooden frame, hung a mosaic, not made of tile or glass, but something better, drawings, real ones, from the students themselves, crayon rainbows, construction paper hearts, pencil sketches of books and sunshine and chalkboards. Some showed stick figures smiling. Others had scribbled thank you notes, barely readable, but overflowing with feeling. And in the center, framed larger than the rest, was a piece by Jamie. Simple, honest, unforgettable. A golden sun breaking through dark gray clouds. Underneath it, in blocky second-grade handwriting, "Thank you for seeing me." That mosaic became more than art. It became a message to the parents who rushed through the halls, to the teachers who doubted their value, to the kids who never raised their hands because they didn't think anyone cared what they had to say. Now they knew. Mrs. Brooks never made a speech about her return. She didn't need to. Every day, she just opened her door, flipped the lights on, and taught like nothing had changed. But everything had. Her lessons hit different now, not because the material was new, but because the room felt different, stronger, more honest, alive. And the kids? They noticed. They walked in straighter, talked more freely, asked harder questions, not just about math or grammar, but about fairness, about choices, about what's right, even when it's hard. One afternoon, a student asked her, "Mrs. Brooks, why do they call this the room where justice begins?" She smiled, not the polite kind, but the real one, and said, "Because this is where someone decided to care, even when it wasn't easy. And once justice starts, it doesn't stop." No one in Hartford looked at the school the same way again, not because it got a new donor, not because the principal was replaced, but because the culture shifted, the tone changed. And it all started with one quiet act of kindness in a cafeteria, a woman who gave up her lunch and almost lost her job for it. That moment, it triggered a ripple, and that ripple turned into a wave. A month later, schools across the district began reevaluating their lunch programs. Teachers got direct lines to food assistance programs. Community centers offered weekend meals. A statewide education blog picked up the story and titled it, "The Teacher Who Changed Policy with a Sandwich." They weren't wrong. Ellison never asked for recognition, but she got it anyway. Not with awards, but with trust, with respect, with children who finally understood that the world could bend toward justice if someone pushed hard enough.